We start the meeting. We already did adequate notice. We already did roll call. Why don't we do a pledge of allegiance, okay? Okay. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we all survived the heat wave, I think, right?
Mullins did not.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself, okay.
Mullins did not.
A little edgy there. Okay, so on the president's points, I don't have much today. I think I'm going to talk more about our retreat and some of the things we're preparing for in all business on the president's report. The only thing I wanted to say is I did go to the golf outing held by the football, the booster club for the football team. And myself and my partners, we came in, I think there were 30, maybe there were 40 squads, or 35 squads or something like that. We probably came in next to last. But we're the most honest golfers there were. So that's, we got most honest golfer award.
That's an oxymoron.
Yeah, yes. But it was a lot of fun, a really good turnout.
It's gonna be impressive.
And congratulations to everybody that put that on. So I just wanted to say that that was a lot of fun. And so with that, let me pass it over to.
The retreat, are you talking about that later or now?
I'm going to talk about the treat later.
Oh, okay.
Right, so there could be more discussion about it.
Got it.
Student representatives report.
No, they don't come.
No, they're not here, all right? Okay. Okay. And so Jim, why don't I go to you for the superintendent's
Online?
report? Well, by the way, just a note here. So we have a parliamentary discussion where Mrs. Brown is going to come in and walk us through. Late this afternoon, she gave me her presentation. It was put on the board docs. So apologize for not getting this sooner, but I spoke to her on Friday and I took a bunch of your questions. Some of your questions didn't pertain to parliamentary procedure. They pertain more to something else. So she's going to stick with parliamentary. As soon as she walks in, after public comment, we'll make sure she has her time and we'll kind of walk through this, okay? Hey, Jim.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
All right. So just this meeting we have, as we typically do in July, we are required by statute to report out really giving summary of the harassment, intimidation, and bullying investigations that were carried out over the last 6 months of the school year. So that's from January 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2022. And Mary Ann, I think that report is in the public 3.1 section there. So I don't know if that's something you can put up for the public.
Yeah, was that late this afternoon?
Yeah, I was late, yeah.
Okay, can you just hold 1 minute.
No worries, I'll talk slow.
Just hold 1 minute. Okay.
I'll talk slowly. So what we do in this report is we break down the total number of investigations that were initiated by school, the number of investigations that were completed within the statutory requirement of 10 days, and the number of affirmed HIBs. We also speak about the nature and the modality of those offenses. So what was the basis for the offense? Why was the student targeted? And then also how, right? So those are all things that go into it. And as I said, we do that twice a year. We do that once in January for the period of July through December. And then I'm really trying to stretch this, Marianne. Excellent. Very good. Okay. So what I'd like to do is we could go to page 2 first, if you don't mind, please. Excellent, thank you. All right, so this gives a synopsis of this past 6-month period compared to the 6-month period prior. As you can see, it's obviously much higher. We've certainly talked about the fact that this past school year we saw far more incidents than we had in the past, but also realize that last school year was, certainly not apples to apples comparisons, being that for much of that period from January to June, we were in hybrid learning still. We weren't in a full schedule. Kids were not in 5 days a week. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. However, 50 investigations is certainly a higher number than we've typically seen over the course of that 6-month stretch, if you go back historically. So when you break that down from the high school, you had 50 investigations, overall 50 investigations that resulted in 27 confirmed HIBs. High school, 23, you see confirmed 4. 20 and 20 at the intermediate, and then the numbers at the elementary school are much lower. One of the things that we identified, just looking at this data, is, and it's obviously, I think, pretty glaring for everyone, is the percentage of confirmed HIBs, based on the high school investigations compared to the intermediate school, right? And I think we saw that when we talked about HIBs, we saw that there were more online things that we were not able to really get a lot of particulars on. We didn't know who the offenders were, that kind of thing, to where the intermediate school was much more, I think, concrete in the investigations. But that is something that we need to look at, and certainly something we've identified, and something that the school safety teams and Ms. Weldon as the district anti-bullying coordinator will work with the individual teams in the schools to address why the percentages there in terms of confirmed HIBs and investigations between the high school and the middle school are inconsistent. Let's say that, right? So that's something we certainly, I think, is obviously a glaring thing that you see in this. And I think some of that. I think, once again, I don't want to speculate, but they're looking at it. They're going to look at that in greater detail as we move into the new school year. And then when you look at the nature of the report, so we go back to page 1, Marianne. Thank you. So, what were the nature of these incidents? So race and/or color or ethnicity came up to be in 7. And by the way, you could have multiple, right? There could be one incident could be both for, race and sexual orientation, you know what I'm saying? So they don't necessarily add up, right? So 7 were related to race, 3 religion, 1 ancestry or origin, 3 sexual orientation, 7 gender identity, 1 mental, physical, or sensory disability, 15 other distinguishing characteristics, or it could be that imbalance of power, which we've discussed, what that means, not necessarily a particular physical characteristic or designated characteristic, but it could just be an imbalance of power. So that's, and you see the comparisons to last year at the same period. And then the mode of incidents, 1 gesture, which we could probably all guess what that was. 3 written, 16 verbal, 3 physical, and then 7 electronic. So most of it coming verbally, but you certainly see that electronic communication is another area that we always work on to address these issues. So it's an ongoing challenge, working and this, as you know, that this report now will change going into this year, because with the new HIB policy that you all hopefully approving this evening, there's some new and additional reporting that will have to happen each year, right? So.
Do you want to have any more superintendent reports, or is this the meeting?
I feel good about it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's really all I had, but if there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions they want to ask at this time?
The anti-bullying coordinators for the schools are no longer the principals, correct? So, and I know we had some overlap because some people were gone or whatever. So for this past school year, that's the case, right?
Correct.
Are the teams at the middle school and the high school made up of the same types of people? Like, is it the SAC and a counselor and this? at the middle school and a SAC and a counselor and this at the high school?
Very similar, yeah, very similar.
Okay.
One thing, I mean, being that you bring that up, one thing that we were discussing today, as a matter of fact, is that one challenge, and it's absolutely true that the anti-bullying specialists in the school are no longer, and it always wasn't really the principal, it could have been an assistant principal. But one problem we are seeing at the high school is that it seems to be a problem more so at the high school than any other school. That it is creating a little bit of an issue with our anti-bullying specialist is also our SAC at the high school. And because the SAC is at the high school has been involved in investigations, it puts that individual, our SAC, in the eyes of the students, for some students, in a different light.
Like a
To
disciplinary.
where, yeah, as more of an administrator. And it has caused some issues in that some students then once, okay, now we're gonna like you to go back and speak to the SAC, that's the person who just did the investigation. And that trust, which is very critical, is sometimes impacted by that, right? So we're gonna have to take a real hard look at that, because at the end of the day, that person being involved in the investigation, as you said, I think is kind of taking on sort of a quasi-administrative, or at least from a perception standpoint, right? Taking on this quasi-administrative function, which in the long run might be more problematic. So that's something the team there is going to have to look at, because ultimately we don't want to, the relationship between our SAC and these students is really important. And if that is being impacted negatively because of some of these things, then we're going to have to tweak, we might have to tweak how we approach some of these things. So just a point that kind of came up today in some of our discussions that we had about
Who
this.
did it? Was it Dawn that did it previously, or was it?
No, it was primarily at the high school, the assistant
So it was either
principal.
Mr. Bosman's or Ms.
Yeah,
Hagerman.
yeah.
So they're still, I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm sorry. So they're still,
We need that presentation.
I apologize. They're still qualified. They're still trained to do it if they went back to it being the old way.
Yeah, well, I don't know that you need to necessarily say one way or the other. I think the issue might come down to the role, right? Because the administrators are still involved, because an
Right.
anti-bullying specialist cannot dole consequence, right? That has to come from principal or principal's designee, an assistant principal.
Mhm.
So they're still involved. So I think we are going to have to look at some of those responsibilities. And certainly, we're certainly not saying the SAC would no longer be involved. I think we might just have to look at
I mean, yeah.
tweaking how those investigations are
Yeah,
happening.
because I had brought that up to you, that I had two separate parents approach me about that their student who has been struggling and thought of the SAC as a confidant in school,
Right.
was then involved in something and no longer feels that way. And no matter what they've tried to do to repair
Mhm.
that relationship, it's
Right.
not being repaired.
Yeah.
So it was something that was concerning me.
And we don't seem to be seeing that problem at the younger grades. So it perhaps is more of an issue at the higher levels. And so I think it is definitely something that we're going to have to continue to monitor, because, the situation you just described is what we're hearing more and more and more. And that, I think, is more problematic ultimately than compared to who does the investigation, right? So we're going to have to look at it and continue to monitor that.
Marianne, can you go down to the second page for a second? I wanted to ask you, it's more, not to get into your knickers, but is the evaluation,
My knickers or Marion's knickers?
your knickers?
My knickers, okay, thank you.
I don't want to get, but.
I
the-
appreciate that, Jeff.
Because the numbers are so skewed, is the evaluation process only a self-evaluation process? Or is there some method to,
What evaluation process are you
of
referring to?
why these numbers are a little skewed? Like, do you look at your own processes, or like, how do you?
Well, that's part of what I think we're talking about.
Is there another element to it? Like, do you take some statistics of other schools, other
Well,
statistics throughout the state and start seeing like how off you are, or like?
well, I mean, every school has to do this report. I will tell you that I look, I do cross-reference of other school districts and see kind of where their numbers are compared to ours. Historically, I mean, our conversations here have been that our HIB investigations have typically been lower in previous years. I think that I think there's been an effort on the part of our administrators that sometimes when they've tended to do more investigations than perhaps they would have done in the past, or and our policy currently says that, an administrator can determine if they see very clearly is conflict, not meeting the criteria of HIB, that they don't have to go through the full process. They can make that determination up front. I think that's happening less, because I think there's an overall feeling that if there's a complaint, we should just investigate it, right? So I think that's part of another reason why you see higher totals. I think behavior is another reason. I think that's certainly it there too. But I think that we just got to look into it more. This is data that is that we're just kind of seeing, and I think the teams have to get together and not just within each school. I think the teams have to get together between schools and talk about philosophically to ensure that there's consistency within investigation in terms of how they're done and who's doing them and making the determinations. So.
Okay. Are there any more questions?
I just have a statement. And as a professional mental health therapist, I'm happy that kids feel safe and that they feel safe enough to report the bullying. Because I know in the past, a lot of kids were fearful that if they reported bullying, that they would even be bullied more. And I think that our district is doing a wonderful job with, with the kids that are the victims that are reporting. So I know it's a lot of work, the investigations, but I think it's really great. I just want to commend, the SAC counselors and the other anti-bullying specialists that are on the district in the district. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have a school business?
I have a couple of things. Next week, I just want to let the board that I'm going to be presenting 2 camps that have put in for a potential facilities use in the 22-23 school year in the summer. So I want to bring that up for discussion. And then the transportation survey, it's going to be closing the end of the month. We already have, more than over 100 responses. So this is going to enable us to be more efficient on how we're putting children on the bus.
Okay, great.
That's it.
Great, super. Any questions for Tina? No? Okay. We're going to move to public comment. Anybody who would like to make, let me read this officially. The following was a series of motions to be read by the committee chairpersons. All motions have been discussed at a recent public work session. Some motions have been approved at a public work session, and the minutes for the approved items are posted on the district website. At this point of the meeting, we will now conduct the first 2 public comment sessions. The first session will be open for public comment on any agenda item only. The second will be at the end of the meeting and will be on any topic. Would anybody from the public like to make a comment on any agenda item at this time? No, everybody passes. Great. I mean, you're welcome to make a comment if you'd like to make a comment. Okay. Mary Ann, would you like to make it? Does anybody online like to make a comment?
Yes, President Weinstein, we have Mike Riley.
Okay.
Please go ahead, sir.
With my new computer, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, hear you great.
Awesome. The old one was a series of issues. I just want to thank everybody for stepping up and really recognizing that we definitely have major problems at the high school. Jim, you and I have spoken about this repeatedly last year, and we both recognized that there were some unusual issues going on. Staff were basically being threatened, offended, disregarded, disrespected on a daily basis. And, they, to basically say that, the wheels came off the bus last year, particularly at the high school, would be a massive understatement. And the staff literally dragged that bus to the finish line at the end of the school year. And, as I'd said earlier, we just simply can't have that again. We have numerous townspeople talking about the high school, what's going on there. They have major concerns. And, these concerns have to be addressed. We cannot have another year this year like we did last year. It just can't happen. So whatever we need to do to fix the issues at the high school, I hope that we can all team up and get these issues taken care of and, not let them wait until late September or October. I think we should be going in straight from day one in September with a solid plan on how to make sure that the high school is taken care of, because we need these high school students to be attending our schools. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the comments. Anybody else
No.
online that'd like to make a comment?
No, that was the only commenter.
Okay, great. Thanks. So now I think we have a guest presenter here today. Let me welcome you officially, Ms. Tasha Brown. Hello, how are you? Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Good evening to members of the Board of Ed.
Good evening.
Hi.
Okay.
So if you feel like wanting to go for the-
Probably have to go.
Okay. Will you all be able to see this?
Yeah, we have it on our.
Yep.
Record our meeting.
So I just wanted to say, Ms. Brown and I spoke the other day, and we had a great conversation. Shwanda introduced us. I did take a number of the questions that you had for me, and I did pass them over to, can I say Tasha, is that okay?
Please.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
please.
And so she has those, and then she has a presentation that she can give us and then intertwine some of these things. And I just want to say that also, we're fortunate enough that Tasha not only has experience as a parliamentarian and as a business person, but also as a board member and board president, I think, at Long Branch
Yes.
School. So I think she has some good perspective on that as well.
Just a little.
So I'm really giving you the build, I'm giving you the big buildup here. So.
I see. I such pressure. Absolutely.
So-
I'll get right, if,
Sure, yeah, whatever you like to do. So I think, would you like the presentation to be brought up or?
sure. I mean,
What's up?
if
What's up?
everyone has it, that's fine.
Yeah.
It'll help me guide discussion.
Yeah, everybody has it on there.
I'll go from slide to slide, of course. Just want to quickly identify board attorney.
Not
Is
Not
board
here.
attorney
No,
present?
no board attorney.
Okay, all right. I always give deference to the board attorney that I am not a lawyer. But certainly the things we'll go through today can be applied in any setting. So I do have a number of slides to go through, not meant, this is not death by PowerPoint, but it certainly is an opportunity to go through some kind of scenarios. Also run through, the reason why this is titled Customs versus Roberts, because sometimes the custom, these are the things that we are so used to doing that we almost believe that they are appropriate or they are proper because we've been doing them for, a million years, if you will, and no one really, corrected us in terms of how to move things forward. So there's a little bit of that. It comes from this lovely book. This is the new edition. It's a parliamentarian rule, and Ms. Bill knows this, that if your Roberts is clean, that means you don't use it. But this is a new one. This is the newest edition. My 11th edition was all beat up and actually going out the binder. That's how much I've used it. But I do recommend that you get one. Right, I'm going to cite some things that are based on what's noted within. There's also a nice, tiny, small one called an In Brief, the yellow book. That's actually the book that we use if you are, full disclosure, if anybody wants to be a parliamentarian, please call me after this discussion. But it is the book that's used to test into the organization, just really cutting through some of the scripts and things like that. So I will jump right into it. Next slide. And thank you to the tech person, wherever you may be, to help me with that. So a little bit of what we're going to go through today. Quick introduction on what it is and kind of what it is. And I won't, assault your intelligence there. I'm sure we're clear on that. The errata of wrongness, I love this. It's a little bit of the things that we've always done that we think were appropriate, that aren't good meeting governance, whether it's a board meeting, a club meeting, on the Senate floor, right? The same sort of activity and motions govern. We'll go through some motions. Mystical meeting rules. I love that approach too. It's some things we've always done. And then a little bit of, not that I do encourage group participation, but there are some elements of this just to practice. I can tell you that I've been board president at Long Branch for 2 years. I've been on the board. This is my 5th year. And I even spent time in another school district prior to that for about 6 years. So I have drilled this into my board in a way that things run smoothly. It was not easy, right? Because custom is just that. It's what you feel most comfortable doing. But we did get to a place, and I'll talk to you about some things that you possibly do here that shows up, right, in terms of how we can move business. And there'll be a couple of reminders, and then I'll open it up to some of your questions if anyone should have one. Next slide. So why is this important? Again, it's just about having your meetings run orderly. There are some meetings that could go, hours. And a lot of times, hours, not because it's a deep agenda, but because people feel that it is their opportunity to speak, right? Almost like the filibuster in a way. And so they may stand and they may speak and they may speak. There are limits on how long you can speak. There are limits on what you speak about. And I'll go over that. But certainly there's a time and place for discussion, usually in committee, and not so much on the floor. But I've seen meetings go ad nauseum, especially if they are not rooted in any form of Robert's rules. There's also to be coupled with your Robert's rules or your bylaws, right? Your policies as a board. Some of that will show up here, but it should never be designed to counter or conflict, right? And of course, the law is the law, and that always supersedes all of this stuff. That's why I asked for the board attorney. I make my board attorney's life very easy. They always smile at me at the end of the meeting because I most likely head something off as a presiding officer that may have gotten out of control. If you don't know your Roberts, you won't be able to speak, right? You shouldn't be able to speak unless you are properly moving motions on the floor, et cetera. So it's all about, now learning so that we can work together, right, as a board, and I'll use we in this context, and doing better as we move forward. Next slide. So parliamentary procedure 101, the whole book, and a few of the authors are still alive, and they will tell you that their intention was to, and it's really, I'll get to the heart of it, which is that last piece. It's to ensure the voice of the minority is respected, right? So everyone should be heard, but it's also to protect the decisions of the majority, right? So that the preservation of the intent of your meeting is protected. That's a difficult balance sometimes, right? As a presiding officer, I'm gonna say some things as we get a little deeper in, but as a presiding officer, it is the president's job, it is our job, right, Jeff, to run the meeting. It is not the board secretary's job. It is not the board attorney's job. It is the presiding officer. If you are not sort of in control of what's happening in that meeting, things can go off the deep end. That's barring people just disrespecting the process and doing what they want. This is all laid in a level of respect, a level of wanting to make sure everyone is heard, a level of protection of your students and your constituents, as well as the taxpayer. So that aside, that's table stakes, that's a given in what I'm discussing here. But when it comes to leveraging Roberts, you want to ensure that things are done in order. So this book covers about 90% of what should be done in a meeting. The 10% might show up in your bylaws, right? It might show up in things that you just do differently. In just the few minutes that I was here, I heard you read a statement. We say it's slightly different in a different order. It's stated in Long Branch, but it's done in a different, in a different order of the meeting, but yet it's said. So there's a little bit of, there's a few nuances there in terms of how you might conduct your meeting, but the heart of running business resides in this book. So that's why it's useful. And certainly, it takes a lifetime. I know the most skilled parliamentarians still have to reference a page, go to a section, and go right to the language in order to get clear on things. Next slide. So a couple of things, again, These are things over the years that I've heard in board meetings and other meetings. And then I'll tell you some I just love, right? Because they happen all the time. So when it comes to making a motion, right? You might hear somebody say, I make a motion or et cetera. Now, this is aside from what might be in your resolution, right? You might as a body or as a member want to actually put a motion on the floor. There are scripts. I arm every president that I work with, and I have my own with a script of what exactly to say and how to say it. Because there is precise language, right? That technically, if somebody wanted to, and I've seen this done, could call your entire meeting or the validity of your meeting, which we talk about in the statement, to question if you're not actually moving business in a proper way. So just a couple of, a few things, proper terminology is I move. Sometimes you have to say, I Tasha Youngblood Brown move, right? For the secretary or for whoever might be writing the minutes, and then you state whatever your motion may be. My board loves at the end of, and I'm not picking on them, but it's not just my board, I'll say, many organizations that I'm in, we'll say something like, maybe there's a motion on the floor, or the presiding officer says, reads a resolution. And before the presiding officer can say, is there a motion, they say, so moved. Right, that happens a billion times in a meeting. That's actually not the right thing to say. So moved, what are you moving? Right, there's no such thing as so moved. You will never find so moved in this book. But if I had $1 for every time someone has potentially heard it, I mean, raise of hands, have you heard someone say so moved? Not so much in this room, I'm just saying, in general, okay. Often it's said, that is not how you move a motion. You actually, if I am the person that's moving the motion, I'll say, I, Tasha Youngblood Brown, move that we allocate, I don't know, $5,000 to the senior class. And then someone would say, I, Shawanda Bill, second the motion. And then you move it on the floor, and we'll talk about that. Because I'll go on to this later in the script. Point of personal privilege. Sometimes you might hear someone say point of personal privilege. It's meant to, they're using it to disrupt action. Sometimes they might mean to say point of information, which is something different, but they might say point of personal privilege. That is often used and abused. You may not hear it in these chambers, but you might hear it otherwise. People use that to say, hey, I have something to say, and I'm going to disrupt whatever you're doing in your meeting so that I can say what I have to say. Really, that there's no space that one would do that in a meeting, other than if you're putting a motion on the floor or you are, doing some sort of counter activity, which I'll get to. Point of information. So if someone has point of information, that's really, it just, again, it's not meant to disrupt the meeting so that you can offer your opinion on a topic. And I'll give you an example. You're discussing a resolution and someone says point of information. I really feel that this is not really the appropriate thing we should be talking about this evening. That is completely out of order. Honestly, I'll get to when the chair is to recognize you. But point of information is just a request for information. You might say point of information, what date are we talking about here? Could you remind me of the cost of XYZ? That's how you would use that. And again, there might be some activity that one just might raise their hand and speak, right? How much was that? What are you talking about? If the chair wants to acknowledge that, that's fine. But there is an appropriate, actually it's not fine. I'm not going to promote bad behavior. It's not fine, right? It's absolutely not fine. You're supposed to use the right things and say the right things in order to ask questions, make motions, etc. And then speaking without being recognized, that should probably be number one. But I'm leaving it at the bottom because it happens often. We all are equal, board members elected by the public, but we really don't function or have the authority until we come together as a board. But sometimes, right, one might feel as if they want to speak. This is where the president, the chair, and the board members, the presiding officer, it's called in Roberts, has the opportunity to acknowledge. You are really not supposed to speak unless the chair acknowledges you by name, by notion, eye contact, whatever the case may be. Somewhat hard sometimes when we're kind of sitting parallel, but you certainly have the configuration that we have as well. And so, you can get the chair's attention, but you really should not be speaking unless the chair acknowledges you. There are ways that you can exercise and and be acknowledged by the chair. It could be through, a point of order. Somebody might ask a parliamentary inquiry. That's just really going back to point of information. But even then, you should be acknowledged, right? And then recognized in that regard. One, is just a very kind thing to do for your secretary and the person that's taking the minutes, because it's very hard to distinguish a ton of voices when they're happening. So that's just the courteous thing to do. But then also, if you have something to contribute, you want to make sure that you're properly acknowledged so that everyone can hear you. And so it shouldn't be a free for all. I'm sure we've all seen board meetings where it's kind of like, chaos and folks are talking. And if there's truly something on the floor, it's very hard for the chair to distinguish that. So it's really important that you respect the chair in terms of waiting to be acknowledged. Sometimes the chair might miss, we're not perfect, right? It's hard to see. It's just a matter of saying, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, may I be acknowledged? That's also, an appropriate thing to do as well. Any questions so far? I see nods, I see.
Kelly, here's your breakfast. Here's your dinner now. Which one are you?
Be muted.
Oh, okay. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not me. Okay, that's not my slide.
What was that?
Okay, next
I think it
slide.
was somebody needed to be muted in
That's
the.
what I okay,
Oh,
yes.
there first.
Question?
Sure, go ahead.
So chaos ensues, and I'm sure that you have this covered later on. What's the proper way to rein things back?
Well, one, it's for, so I'm gonna say one thing. Presidents have gavels. They are never to be used, I'll say, unless you absolutely have to. But it really is a matter of, I can tell you what I've done, right? And I'm sure Jeff would agree. So I won't speak to my board, but I'll say there have been organizations where I've been at the helm of, where there's been a lot of activity, a lot of conversation. Sometimes it's harmless. It's, what page are we on? And then you start talking about breakfast and dinner and vacation. And oftentimes it really is the side conversation that's specific to what you might be speaking on. I am always aware, especially because we're always mic'd as well, to acknowledge if there's chatter, right? I actually don't like to speak over people. I actually think it's rude to gavel. So it's a matter of, excuse me, I keep picking on Ms. Bill, because she's right here, and I've been picking on her for years. So I'll say, Ms. Bill, do you have something you would like to add, or is there a question, or whatever the case may be? There is a point when you are talking about topics where you ask, is there any discussion? That's the point to be acknowledged and speak. But if we're beyond that, if we're off of that motion, if we're somewhere else and you still hear the discussion, that's a feeling of unrest. It is a term that is spoken to here. And so you want to make sure that everyone's settled, right? As we say in church, are all hearts and minds clear? Right? I never say that in the board meeting, but essentially it's, you don't want to move on if people are not understanding, if they're not comfortable, if there's something left to be said. Again, we're protecting the voice of the minority, right? While protecting the majority, right? Which is the broader board. So as a presiding officer, I would feel uncomfortable if I'm moving forward and that minority voice, if you will, not being heard. Now, oftentimes it's not about oppressing someone's voice. It's really about, they just are rambling, right? Or they're just talking about something, in which case they acknowledge the chair and they say, oh no, I'm sorry. You can move forward. So my tactic is to give voice to whoever might be speaking on the topic and not move on until we're done. And I think that's the way to, someone has something to say, we should all hear it, right? Otherwise, you can talk about it after we adjourn. It's kind of how, I've never had to say that. I've never had to gavel, but that's the understanding. And then I'll do something like this training where I kind of say it before, so then we already know we're on the same page, right? So it's a little bit of a softer way to get there. But honestly, if there's chatter, then that means something's not quite, there's something happened. So let's get to the bottom of it. Is essentially, I like to hit things head on. That's just how I am as a presiding officer. I don't like to fester. Again, and most presiding officers I've seen, you're not really supposed to. That's how you get command of the space. If there's something happening in the audience or with the public, then you should have security or someone there to address that. That's something completely different. But amongst your body, you need to be one sound, kind of one mind. Not always that you agree. Everything does not have to be unanimous, but you are there to get through the work, if that makes sense. Did I answer you?
You did, thank you.
Okay, all right. And there are some additional slides there as well. So speaking without being recognized, again, there are ways. I've seen people use this book to bring a meeting to a halt. And I've seen presiding officers just bluster because they did not know how to exercise this book. That's the level of control that one would have, whether you are a member or whether you are a presiding officer. I've seen members know more about what's in this book than a presiding officer and bring a meeting to its knees. I've also been on a 23-hour, I am not joking, a 23-hour meeting where the presiding officer did not know what was in this book, kept referring to the parliamentarian over and over again. I mean, 23 hours, a few breaks, no dinner, on Zoom, torture at its finest. And this bill knows what I'm talking about. That is a real life story. I do not want to ever, I don't wish that on my worst friend, right? I won't say enemy. It was a horrible, horrible experience, but it was right smack dab in the face of not knowing how to run a meeting on Zoom, which is difficult in of itself, with 3,000 participants, which is even worse, right? So we should be able to handle what's in here, right, in comparison to that. So I say all that to say that there are ways to interrupt a motion. There are ways when a motion is on the floor to stop if, let's just say if the presiding officer is moving in a way that's not appropriate, right? There's a way that you can say parliamentary inquiry and say, excuse me, Mr. President, you forgot X, or should we be on this topic? Or, something like that, not in a rude way, right? But in a way to say, just to remind the presiding officer of, hey, maybe, did we forget this? Or maybe there's something on the agenda and a person skipped this. So there's a way to exercise that. Addressing members directly and debate. I know we see it on Law and Order, and I know we see it on TV. And when you're in a presiding in a formal meeting setting, it looks like that is what is supposed to happen, but that's really not the case. As members, you're always speaking to the chair. You're waiting to be recognized by the chair. The chair is hearing you for the benefit of others. You are speaking to the chair, and I keep pointing to you. I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Because you are the chair this evening. So
Yeah, I'm cool.
So, but you speak to the chair, you're going directly with the chair. It's not to, lean over and say, what did you say about that? What did you mean about that, resolution the other day? Denise, what did you mean by that? Right? No, you say, Mr. Chair, right? Or Mr. President, I have a question on resolution X, Y, or Z. You can maybe mention her by name, but you do not kind of go back and forth. And why is that so critical? Because you can go from a question to a debate to an argument quick, right? So you keep always the meeting in control of the chair and to the chair. Whether if it is a formal meeting, sometimes we have workshop meetings, sometimes you go into executive session. Not that you lax Roberts, but it might be for the point of just speaking freely about something, in which case that's different. But when you are presiding on action, you don't, kind of go back and forth and talk like you're outside of this assembly. So that's really important in order to keep order. And then there are just, and I've had to do this for the first time in Long Branch recently, where we tabled something, right? We tabled it because there was so much discussion on it that I didn't feel comfortable moving it. And that's an indication of a few things. One, at the committee level, and we do have committees and then we come together. I understand it may be a little different here. But there was a couple of things that happened, and this is all public information, so I feel comfortable speaking to it. And then maybe it might help you in an example. So something came up and it was just too much discussion. And you know, this is showtime. So this is moving action so that things can happen. We shouldn't still be asking questions about finances. We shouldn't still, you know, kind of asking questions. And then, if you will, being forced. I believe in full transparency. We don't print, you know, try not to print, but we don't produce 400, 300 pages of a board packet for people not to read it and then come to the meeting and not know what we're talking about. And so if there's ever anything that comes up, I'm looking at my board members. Now, we have an agenda meeting before the meeting, right? We have our agenda meeting on a Tuesday, and we have our meeting on a Wednesday. Really hard to forget what we just talked about 24 hours ago, but it happens. But at the same time, what I try to do is to ensure that I never want a board member to move anything that they are uncomfortable with. Now, there are ways that they can exercise that voting. We'll talk about it, but they are to be comfortable with whatever action is on the floor. And so in that moment, if it looks like this particular, you know, item is not ready, we'll postpone it to the next meeting. And you have to state that, right? You make a motion to postpone it to the next meeting. I've had, it happens very rarely, but I had to. You have to state future date and time and why, right? So that it's appropriate for the minutes. Next slide, and I'll speed it along. I know you told me 15 minutes. I'm sorry.
No, I just didn't want you to feel like you needed to, I told you that I didn't want you to be here longer than 8:30 because you.
Okay,
no,
that's
no, for you.
Oh, keep me honest. I will not keep you here. I promise you.
Yeah, for you.
So you have a question?
May I just ask one?
Sure.
I'm just going back a slide for 1 minute. So our procedure here, the way, or our custom, I should say, if you're the chair of, if you're for chair of finance, for example, we usually read our like 20 motions. And then we say, is there any more discussion, and go to a vote. So my question is, if somebody has a point of information, is the proper time to wait till the person reads the 20 motions the way we've been doing it? Or am I supposed, when I get to 8.1 and, you know, Ms. Beal has a question, she says point of information there, you know, like what is the, because I, you know. go
So
ahead.
we do that too. So we move on our agenda. We might say items, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? I mean, it all, you will not understand our meeting if you don't have the agenda in front of you. You will have no idea what each item, so that's the first thing.
So you
But
don't,
we'll do that, right? But yes, if someone has a point of information on 4.1, they can ask it,
at
right,
the,
at the proper time.
Okay.
Yes, at the proper time. We try not to group things that are not similar, or, you know, like personnel actions might go together, you know, contracts
Same,
might go
yeah.
together. Like there's some natural synergy to what we're talking about. So if someone is questioning a particular person or a particular item, right, they can speak to it. But that's done at the point of, and I'll get to it, is there any discussion, right?
Okay.
So you don't necessarily have to do point of information. There is a point when you're doing the motion and you're approving a bunch of items
Mhm.
to get to the question part, in which case, you know, you can ask question on anything that has been said. We've had to do that, items 1 through 7, and someone had an issue with 4,
Mhm.
right? So then we have a motion to separate, right, 1 through 3, skip 4, 5, we move on that, and then we go back and finish the motion, which I'll talk about. Sounds complicated, but it's smooth.
okay, thank you.
Let me
Yes.
ask you a question. So if a topic is being discussed at a large extent, right? And it's felt like we've exhausted the conversation. What's the, right, so right now we kind of let every conversation go till it gets, till everybody has a chance to say everything that they want to say.
Okay.
Okay, that's our typical
That's
way of
fine.
doing it. Board members have talked to me about frustrations in that,
Right,
but we basically have, you know, let everybody kind of, you know, go that route.
right.
Let's pretend we didn't want to do that and we feel like, you know, some things are being too exhausted and what's the proper course here?
So, so there is a slide, I'll get to it
Oh,
when
you
I
get
get
to
to
it?
it, but
Okay.
the point is, no, but I want to address it now, because I might forget.
Okay.
So there is, first of all, you really are not at a point of discussing a motion until you're at the question part or is in discussion or debate. So that's one thing. If it is your practice to have everyone weigh in, I feel that's nice and quite democratic. But what I often say is, does anyone else have anything additional or additive to state? Right? So if we get, and especially if you go in order, so you get to, I can't read,
Oh,
you get to Jim. And now, sorry?
He's a superintendent.
Okay, we'll get to Jim. So we'll get to Irene. And then,
I'm not important.
and then clearly, I'm sorry, clearly. So then we get to Irene and Irene is saying something that Denise has said. Right, at this point, as the chair, you can say, okay, is there any, now you've gone through, right, 4 people at this point. Does anyone else have anything else to say? Not does anyone have anything to say, but does anyone have anything additional to say? Right, that's protecting the voice of the minority by being courteous and asking. And as a board, I'll get to you, John. So as a board, you all should be respectful of not to continue on it, to really have something additional to say. Otherwise, move on, right? So that's just kind of how you move together. But as a president, I think I think it's great that you want to welcome opinions. I sort of try to cut down on because I want to say, and sometimes there's a little grandstanding, sometimes there's a lot of people there, and so that gets fun. But really, you want to get to the point of hearing every voice so that you can move. And honestly, if you really get to a point with as the chair, you felt you've heard enough, then you move to the vote. Period. Right?
Okay.
But considering, again, as a body, everyone needs to understand that's how things are going to work, right? Or someone might feel like you are trying to quench their voice, or you're not trying to necessarily hear them, right? So it's a little bit of the custom. It's not really. Robert says 2 minutes, which is a long time, and not more than twice. Right?
Okay, yep.
On the same topic. Doesn't mean you can give a different point on the same topic.
Mhm.
And that's not by each person. So you can really quickly cut it down and move on. And that's how you don't have the 23-hour meeting or even a 3-hour meeting. John, I'm sorry.
I only raised my hand so emphatically because it was regarding this, but is this a bylaw of a board that I've been on previously, or doesn't Robert say that you can request discussion in the pro and then discussion in the con of a motion that's on the floor? Doesn't that help to limit debate to one side? So I now ask for discussion in the pro of this motion, and then all the pros speak, and then I now ask for discussion in the con, and then all the cons speak, and then you're able to vote, or is that a bylaw thing?
Yeah, that's probably more of a bylaw. It's not necessarily stated like that. So the one thing is that the maker of a motion can speak first.
Right.
So the person, and that, to your point, is someone speaking in the affirmative, right? So then to protect the voice of the minority in your case, or the con, certainly people can speak and they can speak up. They can also, you can have all the pros speak and the con say nothing, right? So there's no rule that says you have to hear both sides. You would hope that that's happening, right? By nature of the discussion, for sure.
And it doesn't I'm only asking this because I've
Sure.
only gazed over it, right? So doesn't Roberts limit total discussion of a topic to 10 minutes? Isn't that a time frame? Or is that also something that would be a bylaw?
Yeah, that would be,
You-
I don't believe it's the 10-minute thing. I
Okay.
think it's certainly each person. I mean, if everyone here, there was a debate or something on the floor, everyone would get 2 minutes, right? Twice.
And you
Or
can
it might have been
request a
3
motion to
minutes, right?
extend.
So you can get to 10 minutes really quickly.
You can
Right.
request a motion to extend though, too,
Sure,
right? Your
you
time on
can.
the floor.
Yeah, you can say,
John, you
like,
can-
let's just say if the president said, I want to, first of all, he doesn't just arbitrarily do it. He has to have a motion to do it. And then you all have to vote it up or down. Otherwise, you keep talking, right? So there's nothing where I shouldn't say, when I said you can quit, you can stop it. You have to put a motion on the floor to do it.
Right.
And then they have to agree. But if you're overruled, if you will, then the discussion can continue, and that's when the limits come into play.
I thought John was gonna ask if he could bank his 2 minutes for perpetuity and then.
Well, you know, on the Senate floor, I yield my
And then
time,
put it,
right?
and then put him on eBay or something like that.
Yeah, we have people yield their time, right?
Yeah.
They start their 2 minute, the clock starts, they only have something
Yeah,
to
they
say, and
yield,
they'll yield, it, and that can continue to happen. So I can yield my time, she can yield her time to 4 of you, and then this person has 10 minutes to talk, right? But the point is that your discussion and your voice is yours alone until you yield that. We don't really get, I've not seen that in a board meeting setting where we yield time, certainly, again, so that's why I led with the, you know, you want to hear, you want to make sure it's clear. No one should just want to talk it, you know, ad nauseum or what have you. It happens. But at the same time, you're just trying to get to the point of the, you know, the valuable information so that you can make a decision and not, you know, the just wanting to speak to be heard, if that makes sense.
So if I thought that was going on and wasn't stopping, what's the recourse?
No gavel.
No, what's the recourse? Is it just saying?
No, you make it, yeah,
I'm gonna- I'm gonna- I'm
yeah,
gonna
you make a
move on to
motion or
another
you
time.
can ask for, you know, you can ask for a motion to end debate.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great.
But you need a second, and then you all need to vote.
okay, great.
Right. And it's 2/3 when you get to the body like this is 2/3 vote, which is harder to get. Rule of thumb, the more difficult motions are 2/3.
Okay.
Right, is that the easiest way to?
You mean
Yeah.
2/3 vote to
So
end discussion?
2/3 of the
End
body.
discussion, yeah.
So if all of you, 2/3 of you present, it's not much, people think everything's majority. Actually, majority is weaker than 2/3, right? So you need to have 2/3 need to vote affirmative or whatever that motion is in order for it to pass.
Okay, great.
And
A motion to end discussion. is
And
what
a
she
motion to
said.
end
yeah,
discussion.
Right.
but it could be a
Yeah.
discussion, it could be
To table.
any debate, some of the hard stuff. That's what I'm gonna say, some of the hard
Challenge the
stuff
chair.
would take that long. Another fanfare, and I'll push through a little bit here because you have the slides. So how many times have we heard, you have a vote of aye or no? It's actually not yay or nay, right? It's aye or no, that's official. How many times have we said yay or nay? I used to have a presentation that said like nay is for horses, and I thought that was rude. It was it wasn't mine, it was originally not mine. But literally, in Roberts, you will see aye for yes or no. That's the proper way, unless you're doing a roll call vote, which I know we do at the Board of Ed level, in which case every member has to say yes or no, right? And if you're doing balloting, excuse me, it's something a little different. Yes, so that's up there.
Abstentions.
Yes, sorry.
Just get back to the last
Yeah,
slide.
could you go
To
back?
abstain.
Because abstention,
Can
yeah.
we, yeah, just. go to that.
So abstentions in our setting, typically you would abstain if you were not present for a vote, right? So something happened and you were not present. But in Roberts, abstentions don't exist. So you have some folks say yes, or yay or no. I think in this case, because we're doing roll call votes, you have to say yes or no. Some people abstain. Usually if you're abstaining, that means you have a conflict, right? We are conflicted. So that's where a little bit where our state statute is a little
Well, I think
different.
we say we recuse ourselves. right?
Recuse,
Right.
that's, I actually prefer recuse.
But
Abstentions is
other than having, you really cannot abstain.
No,
Abstain?
abstentions don't exist.
Right.
Abstentions are no
Right.
votes. I had someone in my board meeting abstain from a vote, and I said, okay, then you're voting no. I said, no, I'm abstaining. There's no such thing. You're voting no. An abstention is a no vote, essentially. So if you want to recuse yourself for some reason, state that, or if you don't want to vote for whatever reason, that's fine, but you cannot say abstain. You're saying no. So when it comes down to it, and why is that the case? If you're recusing yourself, then you're not part of the vote, right? You're then eliminated from the vote count. That's why that's why you count your yes, your ayes and your noes, right? Or your yeses and your noes, depending on the vote. But if you are recusing yourself, then you're not in the discussion as far as determining the 2/3. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep. Next slide. I went here, so, this is more to be understood outside of this. Voting on the minutes, we have a board packet, we kind of, we move through that, but it's important to know, as well as committee reports. Our committee chairs read their reports. It's in the packet, but they read their reports. They don't require a second. If there's actions associated with them, they show up in the form of a resolution. But if you're in another setting, then the reporting of committees is really important. Next slide.
Oh, did you have a question?
I did.
Oh,
Sorry,
Is that okay?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
sorry.
I know, I saw you. I'm so sorry.
If you feel like you don't have enough information, so that was my understanding, you abstain if you don't feel like you have enough information to make a yes or no vote, how would you vote?
Well, during the point where the chair asks, is there any discussion or debate? I'm not sure the language that's used. That is your time to ask the information that you need.
But what if you don't, or it's not given at that time, or it's not available?
Well, that's so now you're creeping into a whole nother territory, right? Because you ask sort of if you're not comfortable giving a vote, right?
Right.
That's something different, right? The point is to get whoever's producing or whatever thing you're voting on, because it could be different things. It's the whole point for you to get all the information properly. For you to pull yourself out of discussion, given your voting power, could skew the nature of this thing passing or not, right? So for me, if we were in the setting, I'm not going to say, a board meeting per se, but if that was essentially the case, I would say, okay, Grace Ann, what more information do you need?
Can I give you an
Right.
example? Is that okay? Can I give an
Is that okay?
example? Is that okay?
Sure.
So we get limited information on HIP reports, and that's by design. But sometimes I feel like I don't have enough information to make a good decision whether or not I feel it was appropriate.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that anyone does anything wrong. It's just, I like to know a little more information. How do I vote then? Because I'm not even, I'm not really allowed to have all that information. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So two things, and this is by no means me giving advice on how to vote on HIP reports, full disclaimer, disclosure. So I'll tell you how I would handle that.
Okay.
So, and this happens a lot with financial information. I have a financial accounting background. I zip through budgets. I understand that. I'm very comfortable with it. I've audited school districts and universities. So I know I'm coming with a different lens. So I make sure that the information is clear to everyone on the board to the extent possible.
Okay.
Right, to the extent possible. We had a similar case where I'll call it unrest. People weren't comfortable. We tabled it to the next meeting. Right.
And to table, you have to make a
Make a
motion,
motion,
and then it has to be voted by the majority
Exactly.
to table that.
Exactly. So let's just
Okay.
say if that happens and the rest of your board members are comfortable with that and it's voted, up and they still want to vote on the HIP report, then there's one or two things. One, the rest of the board is comfortable with what has been communicated and they can make that decision. But I would say it's the superintendent and the board president's responsibility to make sure that you're comfortable
Okay.
going forward. Now, that's barring, there's just some information we legally cannot
Right, I
have.
understand.
So you got to get comfortable with that. This is if I was in that situation, I would be comfortable with that, right? I would have to get comfortable with it. But at the same time, we are all presented with the same level of information and facts. And so we should be able to make a decision. A lot of times it's the presentation. Budget time, financial numbers, like I always feel they should be treated with care. That's just, I'm obligated, I have a license, I'm obligated to feel that way. So I have a different approach to it. But I would say in your particular case, I've gone back to the BA, I've gone back to the superintendent and say, is there a better way that we can do this? Because I want everybody comfortable. Because some people aren't comfortable, but they're not comfortable saying they're not comfortable, if that makes sense. And so they're moving forward, right? And it has required additional training. It has required sometimes one-on-one, especially with newer board members that aren't used to board service. So, and then that for me becomes content for like a board orientation, right? Again, if you're guided with making sure your board members have all the information legally possible that they need in order to make the decision, right, then that's one thing. But it also, you know, it also is important on the counter as well, right? So that's how, I hope that was helpful. There's nothing in here that's gonna say, give Grace Ann the HIB report data, right? But at the same time, there's a little bit around the conduct of your meeting. That's really important.
Thank you.
If that makes sense. Okay, so just really, again, really quickly, I told Jeff I could just talk and the hour is late, so I'm gonna try to just get to the key points here. So, I mean, you'll see these tips, we follow them, notice of the meetings, agenda. Jeff was on me about posting this report ahead of time. I apologize, it wasn't up there in advance, but I do appreciate that, sir, because I get the same thing in Long Branch. Knowing, John, knowing your bylaws and what's, you know, what is appropriate per policy is a big sort of black hole sometimes for board members, especially if you have hundreds of them. So usually we have a governance committee that reminds folks of that, but those types of things help in aiding how you run a meeting versus just kind of driving things arbitrarily. Next slide. I talked about this, the maker of the motion always speaks first. A lot of times we have resolutions, right? So normally if you're making a motion, it might be to counter something, to question, to change. We've done that in our board meetings. We have made a motion to change some language on a resolution, happens on the spot. It's changed and then it's revised, certainly. But the person that made the motion speaks at that point as to why. And here goes the debate point. So debate should be limited to 2 minutes unless you have something in your bylaws, or also standing rules, which is another layer of bylaws, sometimes policy, to say something different. So if your policy does not, if it's silent on it, it's 2 minutes, right? Otherwise, you may have something else stated. And, you know, debate, you know, there shouldn't be this back and forth ping pong argument, right? Everyone gets their opportunity to speak to the extent, and then we move on. Next slide. Here, we understand motions. There are 4 types of motions if you were not aware. There's the main motion, that's the one that we typically always make. A lot of times it's, you know, it's executed through a resolution. There is a subsidiary motion, so that's changing the first motion. There's a privileged motion if you want to bring up things that are urgent. And then there's these incidental motions that are made for questioning. You probably, Grace Ann, if you were, let's just say, not that I'm giving, but and probably not on HIB reports because that's kind of, that's law, that's statute, that's different. But if there was something out there and you wanted to make a motion to be, you know, to reconsider something or state it differently or what have you, or maybe just consider something totally off book, you can use it in that case, not so much the HIB reports, but that would be an example. So let me give you an example of a main motion, and it threw my board for a bit of a loop, but I'm so proud of them because we got through it, right? So we had a motion on the floor, and then someone said, so that we got to discussion, and then someone said, well, why don't we just do X? And I said, well, is that a motion? And they said, no, it's a question. I said, well, there's no one to ask that question. You stated it like a motion. They're so sick of me sometimes. But I said, you know, is that a motion? And then he thought, and he said, well, I guess it is. You know, I guess it is a motion. I said, so as chair, I'm walking them through, right? So the person made a subsidiary motion, which is a motion of the main motion. We acted on that, right? So the board moved on that subsidiary. I think it was like changing time, it was time or a value point as it relates to it, of a particular, not a contract, but a resolution that was out there. Really was a time frame, and it was money associated with it. And it made a difference as to when people would get stipends and things like that. And I really don't play with that. That's really important, right? We're in a recession. Anyway, it's really important that we get that right. So we did a subsidiary motion. It passed. It then changed the main motion, thus the resolution. We updated it, and then we got through it. And when it was over, I said, guys, you guys just did a subsidiary motion. They were like, yeah, we don't know what you're talking about. Right? But the point was they did, right? Just by asking the question. So we typically don't, I haven't seen in a board setting, privileged motions and incidental, but essentially you can make a motion to change whatever has been on the agenda, right? For the sole purpose of, you know, making it better, maybe there was a mistake, you know, whatever the case may be. Next slide. So these are just a couple of slides in here. You're gonna have these reiteration of, you know, when you make a motion, it's I move that, I, whoever you are, move that, not so much I make a motion. Or I second that emotion. I love that one, because that's a song. That's not a motion. The next one is around, you know, the so moved, it's not the case, right? You say I move that. Next slide. Goes pretty quickly here. And then the chair, once you have moved a motion, right? And now you are ready for it, you know, now it's done. The chair says, the motion before you has been moved, or it has passed, or it has failed. That puts the button, you know, on the motion. In between that, the chair asks you, is, you know, do you have any debate? Do you have any discussion? Whatever the case may be, that's what starts the two rounders, if you will, on that discussion. Next slide. So quiz time. Okay. So once the motion or resolution has been moved and seconded, what's next?
Discussion.
Discussion.
Right, and do you all call it discussion, or do you call it debate?
Discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
discussion
Right, 'cause
sounds
there's a
better than
difference,
debate.
isn't it? Don't you just feel like
Actually, we say,
you're going into battle?
actually, we just say, does anybody have anything that they want to talk about or? any
That's,
questions?
that's
Yeah.
fine, I mean, that's not a Roberts, but that works, right? It's very prescriptive.
Can you make a motion anytime
You
on
can,
anything? You make
Yeah.
a motion anytime on anything.
well, if you can, so if there's a motion on the floor, then your motion has to be a subsidiary motion to what we're talking about on the floor. Right, I say on the floor, point to the floor, but you know what I'm saying, if you're moving something. But can you,
Yeah, but I mean, it's during old business, new business, again, somebody decides
yes,
that
yes,
they want to
yes,
make a motion
yeah, exactly.
anytime.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You just have to, whatever your thing, you know, whatever's being moved, one has to agree,
Okay.
right? I mean, you can open your meeting and someone can make a motion to adjourn it without having done any action. Why would you ever?
Why did you start out? You should have started the whole presentation off with that.
I'm not saying it's maliciously done. I'm just telling you, it fails.
Holy cow.
It fails, right?
Not all the time.
I don't know.
I haven't seen it pass. I mean, talk about creating some issues, right? You wouldn't want that, but yes, to your point, you can, except
Okay.
if something's already on the floor.
Great.
Next slide. Okay, right, is there any debate, is there any discussion, are we ready for the question, is the point, next slide. I realize I can't quiz you because I gave you the answers, so we'll just go through it. You know, how do you get clarity in a business meeting, how do you get clarity, next slide. So this is that point of information. Orders of the day is hardcore Robert's rules, you can read up on that, but literally you could stop a meeting, you can call the entire meeting to question by saying orders of the day. That's essentially calling the president out and saying, you don't know what you're doing, right? You didn't do the public, the notice that, you know, we read in the meeting. Like, it literally is a complete departure to the normal order of a meeting. It's not to be used lightly, and it's one of those swords, right? Those Robert Rules swords, and I've never seen it used, but I've heard stories about it. Next slide. So just again, we do from a Board of Ed perspective, we're doing the aye and the no, right? In order to say if someone's in favor, we're doing a roll call, a yes or no. That is your response when your name is actually called. There is a way if you essentially don't want to do the voice or the roll call. I've not seen it in a board setting because we literally have to go on record around resolutions, et cetera. But if you're in another setting, you can say it's really by general consent. So you can say if the membership agrees, then if there's no objection, we won't recess for XYZ, right? And if there's no objection, you just move forward with it. If at least one person says, no, I object, I think we need a recess, then you have to continue on with your normal order of business. And then of course, by ballot. There are no other valid methods for capturing or obtaining a vote of a deliberative assembly, right? There are motions, there are votes of yes or no, or aye or no, or the general consent. There is no other way that you get the voice of this
What?
group here on a particular topic. Yes,
Straw
yes,
polls.
yes.
Straw polls, yeah. Straw-
Yeah, they don't exist in Roberts.
Okay.
They
Now,
don't
let
exist
now,
in
let me tell you something that's pretty close to it. So when you go into executive session, right, you know, you don't vote in executive session. You're discussing the thing to then come out of executive session and move to a vote. Sometimes in executive session, you might want to get a sense of where people might vote, right? I mean, it's sensitive, you don't necessarily get pre-notice to it. So it's kind of like an on-the-spot decision. So you might want to get a sense of where people are. I've never heard like straw poll or whatever the case may be. But as a chair, you might say, is everyone feeling comfortable with this? Are there any more questions when we come out here to the public? We're going to vote, X, Y, or Z. That's as close to a straw poll that I've ever heard of in terms of trying to capture the sense.
You should, you should send some of our meetings. We've done some.
Sorry?
straw- You should send
Now
some of our
that they're,
meetings.
if they're recorded, I think I might. I think I might. But yeah, you certainly don't do that publicly. You certainly don't. A vote is a vote. There's no like straws that a vote is a vote. So either you're voting or you're not. Sometimes if you have to go into executive session.
I think the way we typically use it is, and tell me if I'm wrong in this interpretation, is the way we typically use it is we all agree, we try to see if there's an agreement in a direction. But there has to be work that has to be done and more information to kind of get it to that, so that we can then approve it the next time. So we all say, hey, you know what, we all want to do this, and we all agreeing that we should do this.
It's kind of like general consent, but it's
It's
not.
it's kind of like a general consent, but we kind of do it as a straw poll vote.
So clarifying question. So there are no committees that item would go to?
We don't, we're a committee of
So
the
you're
whole.
all committee of the whole?
Yeah, we're
right?
committee
Do
of
you
the whole.
have and second question, do you have a set time by which you do committee business versus board business? Or is it all kind of done at the same time?
It's all done at the same time, right?
Well,
I mean,
there's
there's a work session. and then
Okay,
there's
so
regular
then
meeting.
something like that will be done at work session. But when you're at your general meeting or your public meeting, you vote on what's on the floor. Work sessions, councils do that as well. So work sessions, you're talking about the thing, you're determining whether you're gonna put it on the agenda or not, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You wanna make sure that there's information. Nothing should go on the agenda unless it's ready to be voted upon.
Okay.
Sometimes they're not already ready, they're not ready for showtime because there might be something that may have been missed, in which case you either in discussion, get to some clarifying point around that, right? Or you move it or don't put it on the agenda at all because it, to your point, it may not pass, right? The thought is that no surprises, right? You've thoroughly gotten comfortable, whether it's on the agenda or it's in the packet or something that happens in between each meeting. And so you're at a point where you can move on it, recognizing that you don't have the committee kind of to do the work. You're gonna see slides here that says boards are not committees, but if you are operating as a whole, then that means it is more of a due diligence on your part as a body to make sure that you have all the information possible to move it to a vote. Doesn't mean everyone will be equally 1,000% comfortable, but everything that's necessary to make that decision should be present, right, and accounted for.
Okay, great. That was very helpful. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I think, I'm trying. But yes,
Just real quick, I don't even know how to put this, but when you make a motion with a time frame, right? It could be anything, like, I make a motion that, I don't know, within 6 months, we're gonna change the price of something, a fee.
okay, I moved that, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I moved that. But then there's a discussion, and maybe the time frame is different now, right? So maybe instead of 6 months, it'll be till the end of the school year or something.
Okay,
Do we vote twice, or do we now, just reword the original
Okay, so you are voting twice, but let me walk that example.
Thank you.
for you. So there's a motion on the floor to, give me the thing again.
To change a
To hold,
fee
can I make it up?
of,
To have prom on June 13th, 2023.
Right.
Right? Make sure I don't forget that date. June 13th, 2023, right?
Second.
It requires a second. There's a discussion. During discussion, someone says, well, June 13th is really when we're gonna observe Juneteenth. I'm making it up, right? So the point is that that date is a conflict, so you can't have prom on a date because there's something else happening. So then, once in discussion that's realized, then someone has to make a motion I would like to amend the previous motion to hold prom on June 20th, 2023.
okay,
You all vote, there's a second. Is there any discussion? You all vote. So now the original motion, right, because that was just changing the date,
It's
right?
considered subsidiary.
Right, that's the subsidiary motion. Then you
Okay.
back into the first motion, and the president says, okay, the new motion on the floor is prom will be June 20th.
gotcha.
And then you move it. Classic example, right? So once someone states a motion, that's the motion. You don't get to, well, do we want to do this? No, you have to, I mean, if it's seconded, and then you all are in a discussion, you have to move that motion. So one of you, I would be so proud if one of you says, I'm sorry, that there's a motion on the floor. We either have to amend that motion or vote it down, right? So one of you will do, I'm gonna be watching. Someone's gonna say that, I'm sure, but that's how you do it. You don't kind of change it in the middle of the motion because you have to get consensus. Because you know what happens when you don't, and 1 second, John, you know what happens? Someone say, well, I thought we were voting on, I thought we were voting on this. I thought we were voting on that. Well, it should be June 18th and not the 20th. Well, I thought the 13th was fine. She's wrong. It's not, right? And so you have to handle whatever the thing is, and then you back out of
So
it
you're voting 3 times,
Twice.
twice. Because you're,
not for the amendment, just the original motion. and
well,
then-
so when you're in the motion and you go to a discussion and someone is changing that original motion,
Mhm.
there's that vote, and then you back out to the original.
Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully it shouldn't get so convoluted that you're going down
Yeah.
the slippery slope and I want 20th, 30th, the president can kind
No
of reel
problem.
you all in on that, John.
Using that same example, let's say that the procedure that you just outlined is violated. You kind of touched on this in the beginning. It is the responsible member notices that this violation of procedure, is that point of parliamentary procedure? What do you do
Like
to
if someone didn't go down.
say,
you
for example,
consider
the chair doesn't rein it in, and it is not properly moved through, right? And you're trying to bring to the attention of the board that we are violating parliamentary procedure
that.
here.
Yeah, you say parliamentary.
You say point of parliamentary inquiry?
Correct, yeah. 'Cause-
Not
'cause what you are,
parliamentary
you're
procedure?
asking a question. Yeah, it's not, it's parliamentary inquiry, it's in the slide. So what you are then questioning, the right procedure. Right, but the word is parliamentary inquiry.
I was under the
Yes, I have
impression
a
that if you
question.
knew there was a violation of Robert's rules, you could state that.
Right, but so you can state it, but you exercise that by saying parliamentary inquiry, and then the chair has to acknowledge you, and you say, I'm sorry, but we should have did a
Okay,
subsidiary motion, or,
Okay.
we didn't follow procedure, is what you're doing at that point.
and then when it does finally come time to vote, right?
Mhm.
There's no discussion during the vote. You can only answer in the
No,
affirmative or
you've
the
already
negative.
had discussion before you say.
So you can't
yes or
add
no.
anything, you can't get back in a debate, bring up any opinions, you just have to say yes or no.
Right, which is why the president doesn't move when there is discussion, right? Especially if you're all getting 2 minutes, right? But the president, he should be looking to see, okay, I've heard from everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And then you move to
Okay, good.
that point.
Good.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
So I just want to go back. There are no straw polls.
No, unless your bylaw says there is, right? I told you that. So does your bylaws allow for straw polls? It might be a custom then, right?
It's a custom.
And all you all looking at each other, so I've not seen the video. I do not know what happened.
Video.
at meetings.
It's a custom.
It's a custom that our
But
attorney
it's
said.
it's perhaps a
Yeah.
custom,
There's a custom.
right? And again, if it's not a bylaw and you will not find that in here, then it's something that you do to lengthen your time together. I'm not sure how else to preface it, but I mean, obviously you're trying to understand, trying to get to consensus, right? If you don't have a means to do that prior to coming as an assembly, then you need to do it during discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, yes.
On our agendas, oh, sorry, on our agendas, usually, the work sessions will say like discussion and then acceptance of this bid or something like that. And then in the regular meeting, it will say action, acceptance of this bid. So it's almost like we read this topic twice, right? Like, so we should.
Yeah, if you have your, I mean, we call it agenda meeting, you call it your
Workshop.
your work session, that's also a point where you can kind of iron that stuff out.
So if there's ever, like, where we skip the discussion part and it's just, we need to vote on this tonight, and we've never had a second reading or second, is that something that's a policy thing, or is this a parliamentary question that
Are
I'm
you talking
asking?
about policy? So this is a custom thing, and it's pretty standard. If you're talking about policies, usually there is there could be a bylaw, or there could be something that says multiple readings.
Yeah,
Like in Long Branch, we have multiple readings of policies, but then on the, after the second, we vote, right? So it's understood, it's in the packet, we look at it, the committee says what they did, and we move forward. But whenever there's and I hope this comes to your point, whenever there is a motion on the floor, you offer discussion. You move, you second, you move to discussion.
Whether or
You never
not,
skip discussion, regardless of what happened in workshop. Your public meeting is what I'm understanding is where you do the business, right? That's where you vote. So you don't skip discussion. Right, whether you say discussion, you say vote, whatever Jeff says, you all know what's happening now, right? You're motioning, it's second, this is the point, this is the last point, right? For you to get out whatever you need to get out at that particular moment. That's the point of it. It sounds like your workshop is meant for you to get to that point, right? So I would, and those meetings should be longer than your board meeting, right? Because you're digging into some of the details. So that should be the intention of that. Yes, not Seer.
No, I'm Tina. I'm the board secretary.
Okay.
So what I think where we're falling short on that is when we do a work session prior to the regular session.
Yeah,
Because we tend to
tonight.
say, oh, well, could we just push that to the regular meeting? I think what we have to start doing is everything has to be done in work sessions prior to the regular meeting. I think that would, and I don't think you have a work meeting that night.
Sometimes the issue is that you have things that come up that are timely, that need a vote and don't have the ability to go in front of a work meeting and then a regular meeting 3 weeks later. It's got to be voted upon. So it goes on as an item for vote, but there's always discussion
Maybe
before
it
the
Right.
vote.
I was gonna say that.
There's always discussion before the vote.
So that's it.
Yeah, that's the point,
Yeah.
is that, so unless you have a bylaw that says exactly what Jim said, that it has to go through workshop before it goes to regular meeting, if you have something that says that, then you have to abide by it, but if you don't, then you're using that workshop meeting to get faster, right, to be more expedient in your public meeting, your board meeting and other stuff. But you're right, there's some things that are timely. There's some, we publish our board packet the Friday before. We publish it every Friday, like a Friday packet. But certainly the things that are on the agenda for the next week are there. But if for some reason, there's something else, something happened between Friday and Wednesday, for example, then we let the board know. You're gonna see an updated XYZ in your packet, make sure, again, full transparency, right? You want them to be able to make an informative decision and vote, but not to, slide it through.
So if we do have a policy that says you must discuss something in a work session before you vote on it in a regular session,
Right.
then unless it's like Dr. Spankwitz said, absolutely time critical, something's happening tomorrow, we really have to
Right.
talk about it beforehand.
Yeah, if you have a policy that says that.
Okay,
And if for some
think
reason you
we
have
do,
to
right?
deviate from policy.
we do, don't we have?
If you have to deviate from
Make a motion to
policy, then
deviate from
then-
policy.
Exactly. John
Okay.
Gotcha, he has you covered. He's gonna make sure that's done. But yeah, then you make a motion to do that,
Thank you.
right? And it's not, you never suspend your policy, you don't suspend your bylaws, you just say, this thing is time sensitive, critical. Normally it is, right? Impacting children, family, so you have to. How many times did we do that during COVID? We wouldn't have allowed a policy to not allow us to do what we needed to do. So it's possible. Okay, I know I'm getting there. Next slide. It's the last one. So it's just, again, just a reminder, and you know, we've been asking questions along the way, which is, I appreciate it, rather than waiting at the end. So if you're the chair, you allow motions that are in order, that are in order only, right? So that means we're not just talking randomly, you're posing things as motions. You have members obtain the floor properly, that's just making sure that you're recognized, right? You make sure that all questions go through the president. You don't start talking amongst each other and talking to, it's hard sometimes, you might direct, but you're talking to the chair. You speak clearly and concisely, and again, courteous. And if you're a member, you're directing all the questions to the chair. The power lies in the group, not in the chair, right? So we control the meeting, but as a body. In some settings, the chair doesn't even vote, right? I know in roll call, we vote, but in other settings, the chair doesn't vote. The parliamentarian doesn't vote. Everyone else votes, right? In board settings, roll call we do. And again, motions require action, so you want to make sure that everyone's clear and don't argue with each other. That's the last one. Okay, questions? I'm done, and I'm sorry.
No, it was
yeah.
very, it was very
Took me a
helpful. No,
little
really
time
appreciate
here,
it.
but
Really
I hope
appreciate the
that it
time
was
and everything.
helpful.
Great job.
Yes.
Just one quick question. When we do a vote on anything, is it always supposed to be the same order about like alphabetical, or is it supposed to be where we sit, or who's oldest? You know,
So
whatever.
there's no Roberts on that, but it's
So,
gonna be.
can be
um,
whatever.
We do.
Yeah, we do in order of preference. So he'll start the president, the vice president, and then it's like in order that way. So it just makes sense. But yeah, but there's no rule against that.
There's no rule about, it must be alphabetical. It
No,
must be-
there's no rule on that, especially if people are, absent. Even if people are absent, you still call, because you have to acknowledge the fact, you still call the name, because you have to acknowledge the fact that the person isn't there, right?
Mhm.
For the proper count on the vote, things like that. So that's more of a matter of record than it is Robert's rules.
Great.
Any other questions?
Anybody other thing that you want to ask? No? This was great. This was really helpful.
Thank
Yeah,
you all.
very
so
nice.
much.
Yeah, really
Thank
appreciate
you.
We got the applause. Look at that, huh?
Thank you so much.
Straw poll.
Straw poll, could I
know.
leave?
Yeah.
And again, I'm available if anyone has any questions, but certainly make sure you do the vote.
Are you speaking, are you speaking in Atlantic City? Anyone know? She in it?
Yes, absolutely.
Really good.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
want to stay for the rest of the meeting? Observe to see what takes.
Thank you.
Let's know.
You all have a great night.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we do the president's report? No.
You're at
Um,
action.
Let me see.
We're in action.
Okay, we go to approval of minutes. Ms. Gilman.
Certainly. Move to approve the meeting minutes in accordance with Board of Education bylaw 0168, recording of board meetings for our work meetings and executive session of July 12, 2022. Are there any
Second.
questions? Any discussion?
Somebody second that?
Mr.
John-
McCarthy
John-
did.
John seconded it. Yep. Any discussion? Okay,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
all
Any
right.
abstain or opposed?
No, abstain.
Motion carries.
Ms. McGovern, would you like to do financial management and resource services?
I would love to, Mr. President, and I'm going to do it in my quick flight attendant voice. 6.1, the following resolution certifies that the budget balances at the end of June 2020 were adequate to pay all remaining obligations of the 21-22 school year, and account groupings required by the state have adequate balances. Board is also certifying that the independent reports of the treasurer and the business office are in agreement. 6.2, the following motion is to transfer monies from one account in the budget to another and to provide the adequate balances referred to in the first motion.
This is fast.
6.3, move for the approval of the following paid items as listed below.
You don't do the safety procedures.
I
of the plan,
absolutely do.
right? Okay,
I
great.
absolutely do. 6.4, move to approve the use of facilities as attached memo dated July 26, 2022. 6.5, move to approve the use of facilities as per the attached July 26, 2022. 6.6, move to approve the following security drills for the month of June 2020. 6.7, move to accept funds under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act grant application for school year 2023. The notification is required under ESSA compliance regulations. Salary and staff information will be forthcoming. 6.8, move to accept an additional donation of $2,242.28 from the Cisco Systems Matching Grant Program in partnership with the former Board of Education member, Mr. Stupi, a Cisco employee. 6.9, move to approve the following school bus transport nursing service contract for a special needs student as listed below. 6.10, move to approve the engineered solutions program by NJ Natural Gas for the district in accordance with the attached overview and agreement. 6.11, move to approve Township of Ocean School District's purchasing manual as attached. 6.12, move to approve a contract with Preferred Home Healthcare and Nursing Services, Inc. of Eatontown to provide a registered nurse or licensed practical nurse to ride the bus to and from school and attend the school day with the student at a rate of $54 per hour for the period of September 6, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. 6.13, move to accept 22-23 New Jersey non-public school textbook aid program allocations for the district totaling $19,734. Each non-public school allocation is as follows: Hillel High School and Elon High School. 6.14, move to accept the 22-23 New Jersey non-public school technology aid program allocations for the district totaling $12,558. Each non-public school allocation is as follows, with Hillel and Elon being the recipients. 6.15, move to approve the 22-23 New Jersey non-public school nursing service aid program allocations for the district totaling $44,688. Each non-public school allocation is as follows, again to Hillel and Elon High Schools. 6.16, move to accept 2022-2023 New Jersey non-public school security aid program allocations for the district totaling $81,795. Each non-public school allocation is as follows, again with Hillel and Elon. 6.17, move to approve a transportation jointure agreement with Dale Board of Education with the Township of Ocean to act as the host as follows. Jointure agreement, 6.18, move to approve a transportation jointure agreement with West Long Branch School, with West Long Branch Board of Ed, with Township of Ocean Board of Ed to act as host as follows. 6.19, move to approve a transportation jointure agreement with Eatontown Board of Ed, with the Township of Ocean Board of Ed to act as host as follows. 6.20, move to approve jointure agreement with Monmouth Regional Board of Education, with the Township of Ocean Board of Education to act as host as follows. And finally, 6.21, move to approve the renewal of the following indoor air quality plan, standard operating procedure manual, student activity groups handbook, and parent organization handbook. May I have a second?
Second. Very nice. Amy. Nice telling. And any discussion at this point? Any questions? Ms. Gilman?
For the standard operating procedure, of course, our free lunch application is there, but I know that Sodexo and the government has approved the lunch program for next year, again, from the pandemic. So do we still accept applications for the free lunch?
You
program?
must, because at any time, because at any time that program could change,
Right.
and then you have to go based on application eligibility.
So parents will still be filling that out.
The letter is getting prepared and it probably will be going out by next week.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hayes?
And I'm probably getting this wrong, what Ms. Brown said. So in 6.4, point of inquiry, please. This is the first time we are seeing this use of facilities, but we are being asked to vote on it. Do we not have in our policies that we have to read something first before we vote on it?
Well, there should have been the discussion at this work session.
Okay, so which we didn't do. And this goes along with 2 weeks ago when we were, kind of discussing the facilities, fees and changes and all that. And I know it sounds like a broken record, but we literally talked about this 2 weeks ago. And some folks on this dais were comfortable with maybe we not approve things past, the
January.
1st January.
Yeah.
And there's some in here through August.
What I did was I changed the letter
Mhm.
to tell each person that's asking for facilities use that our fees are subject to change as of September 1st. because I figured I would, need some time, and I know we were gonna meet as a facilities committee to try to view all of that. I know that I need to look at both the usage of lights and the custodian time, because that has not been updated to the new contract of the custodians' salaries. So that's how I handled it, Alex.
Is there any benefit of keeping it that way, which I think I am okay with, versus let's not do anything past the 1st of January? Like, why is one better than the other? Like, wouldn't doing it possibly nothing past January force us in case we don't have a committee meeting,
Which
or in
one
case we
there
don't
is
change
past
things, you
January?
know?
We're on the,
Still in soccer.
may I butt in for a second?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, there's a bunch from
Soccer,
soccer
yeah.
that go to it. And then also, we're probably gonna be we might be getting other requests from the things.
We got basketball and, yeah.
So I think what we did on the last meeting, just my recollection, was we said that we were gonna try to take our time and do something for January 1st going forward, which would be, give us a chance to look at things, so it feels like you're putting yourself a little under the gun, right, to do it September 1, right?
Well, no, what I said is prices can be subject to change after September 1st.
Oh,
Okay,
oh,
so,
not by
right,
September.
not by,
Not by,
but subject
after.
to, right.
Okay, okay.
Does that language say, though, that would grandfather in existing plus ones, or?
No, I mean, the seasonal fees we're gonna collect up front. So
Mm-hmm.
if we decide to change the seasonal fee, but, my concern with that is, what are you gonna look to get, an extra $100?
No.
It's not worth right now saying no to these organizations that have been very supportive of us and have done
Sure.
donations.
Right.
Okay. So I think, so you did kind of do what we asked,
There's a
right?
caveat in
Right.
there, and I highlighted
Okay.
it on all the letters that
So
are
based
going.
on that, we don't have
Thank
to
you.
decide anything before January, right?
When Ms. McGovern tells me to schedule with the team, we'll do that, and we'll start taking a look at everything.
Thank you.
Is that good for everybody?
I'm sorry,
Good.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
Ms. Tortorella is in charge of finance.
Right.
I'm in charge of planning, so,
Okay.
for planning construction, so
Right.
I think
Okay.
it's kind of we met as a finance, the policies under finance.
Okay.
I think that the long-term range, which is gonna be a little bit more in-depth, is more under planning. So I'll get with you this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to get something on the
Yeah,
calendar. This way we can
Natalie,
start looking.
Natalie's away, so I'm sure once she gets back, she'll be able to.
And we have to look at the regulation and the policy for 7510, which is what this falls under.
Okay, great, thank you, Ms. Truba. Any other discussion points? Okay, I think we can do a vote. We can
Mrs.
move to
Beal?
vote.
I
Ms. Gilman,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. McGovern,
yes.
Ms. Prolamus,
Aye.
Ms. Delarico.
Ms. Del Rico,
Pretty sure she said
I know,
during
she
a roll
had
call vote, you answered yes or no.
And Mr.
Yes.
She said
Weinstein.
during a,
Yeah.
during a.
Is this
open
roll
meeting,
call?
you said-
5 or she said yes or
I
no?
think I could
Yeah.
still say that.
It's okay.
When we
It's okay.
stop.
It's fine.
It's good.
So moved.
Is this
Roll
called a
call
roll
vote is a
call?
vote by each person. Yeah.
Okay,
That's considered a roll call vote.
Instruction, education, and student activities. Irene, could you do those?
Yes, certainly. Mr. Weinstein, there are 9 action items for instruction, education, and student activities. 7.1, move to approve the request of Monmouth University student to fulfill their clinical practice requirements during the 2022-2023 school year in accordance with the attached memorandum dated July 7th, 2022. 7.2, move to approve the request of college university students to fulfill their early field placement requirements in accordance with the attached memorandum dated July 21st, 2022. 7.3, move to approve the request of college university students to fulfill their internship requirements in accordance with the attached memorandum dated July 7th, 2022. 7.4, move to approve the following evaluation instruments for professional staff for the 2022-2023 school year. New Jersey Principal Evaluation for Professional Learning for supervisors, directors, assistant principals, and principals. District Development Evaluation Instrument is based on the Charlotte Danielson model for professional staff. 7.5, move to approve out-of-district private tuition placements for the 2022-2023 school year in accordance with the attached list dated July 12, 2022. 7.6, move to approve out-of-district transportation for 2022-2023 school year in accordance with the attached memorandum dated July 26, 2022. 7.7, move to approve the out-of-school suspension report for the month of June 2022. 7.8, move to approve the work calendar for the 12-month employees for the 2022-2023 school year. A copy is attached. And 7.9, move to affirm the receipt of the following harassment, intimidation, and bullying incident summary reports for the 2021-2022 school year. The reports were previously provided to the board by the superintendent of schools. The board has reviewed the reports and affirms the superintendent's reports. HIB report number 22, July 12, 2022. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? To anybody?
So 7.1 through 7.9.
Ms. Beal?
Yes, and I'm sorry, she did say, yes during a roll call. Thank you for that, John.
Ms. Gelman?
Yes.
We're all human.
Ms. Hayes?
I didn't know this was called a roll call. I thought that was only in the beginning. So
Called
yes,
you.
yes, please.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. McGovern?
Yes.
Ms. Palamas?
Yes.
Ms. Telerico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
Moved.
Thank you, Ms. Gilman. Negotiations,
Negotiations.
Ms. Beal.
Yes. Okay, for 8.1, move to approve the sidebar agreement with the Township of Ocean Transportation Association as attached.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, I think we do,
Ms. Beal?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern?
Yes.
Ms. Palamas?
Yes.
Ms. Telerico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
yes. Denise, did you do personnel?
Certainly, I have 10 motions this evening. First, I'd like to move to approve the retirement of Phyllis Goldstein, payroll manager. 9.2, move to approve the following resignations as listed below. 9.3, move to approve the following teachers for the 2022 summer bridge program at the intermediate school as listed below. 9.4, move to approve change on guide effective September 1st, 2022 for staff members who have submitted proof of completion of their required courses in accordance with the attached list below. 9.5, move to approve credit reimbursement for courses completed during winter, spring 2022 as listed below. 9.6, move to approve revisions to the following job description, which is assistant transportation dispatcher bus driver. 9.7, move to approve substitute teachers as listed below. 9.8, move to approve issuing contracts to the following as listed below. 9.9, move to approve the revised contract be issued for Jessica Vigil McIntosh as listed below. And 9.10, move to approve Mark DeSoma as a volunteer coach for the boys cross-country team at the high school for the upcoming year. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great.
Miss-
Sweet.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes. Ms.
I'm
Beal?
sorry.
I have a question about 7, excuse me.
Personnel.
Well, it's
9.1.
personnel,
There's
Irene.
no discussion. We didn't-
Yeah.
I was not gonna, okay.
Okay.
I wasn't discussing.
Just,
We could ask, is there a question, is there
Is there
not a
a
question? is there-
clarification,
Yeah.
not really a question.
I don't know. Jim, I don't know.
It's,
Is it personnel specific or is it
No,
about?
it's
some-
substitutes in general.
Okay, that's fine. I think that would be okay.
So our approval of these substitutes and throughout the school year. Did the governor or did the Department of Education change the policy, and did we change the policy that now 30 credits would be acceptable for our substitutes?
There's changed rules as to.
I thought it was changed as of January 2022, that
Yeah,
now
I
we
believe,
could
I
yeah.
think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
accept students, just to widen our pool.
Rules for substitutes, rules for teachers, rules for her, the pool has been widened across the board.
Thank you.
I'll send an email. It's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Kim's,
All right, so I'm gonna go for a call. Vote. Ms. Beal,
Yes.
Ms. Gilman,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. McGovern,
Yes.
Ms. Prolamus.
Yes.
Ms. Delarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
yes.
Moved.
Thank you, Ms. Prolamus. Policy, Grace Ann?
Thank you. So we have 10.1, move to approve the final revisions to the following policies and or regulations as attached.
Second.
Any discussion?
He really wants to get home before that coin goes off.
Mega Millions.
Alex, is there something you wanted to discuss?
Yes, the one, P3161 and P4161, requiring the psychiatric examinations of staff members and support staff. We did not discuss this that I recall at our last meeting. So I'm a little uncomfortable voting on this until there's a little bit more point of inquiry. So
These are second readings, I believe.
Yeah, I think these are second reading.
I don't know if we talked about it though.
we did not talk about it. And she said we can discuss, we have to discuss before, we can discuss before any vote, right? So so my question is, why are we, like, did something come up that preempted this policy? What does the union think about it? There is no mention in here about union representation at these meetings with staff members. I kind of have a global concern that we are saying we may require the physical and or psychiatric examination of any member who shows evidence of deviation from normal physical or mental health, and then we have to require them to take a psych eval that the results of which go to the superintendent. So I'm just curious if we can get a little more background. What are the privacy issues, HIPAA issues? What does our attorney say about this and so on? The last time this was adopted in 1991. I'm kind of shocked at some of the language in this policy. So can we get some discussion or clarification on why we're doing this?
Jim, I don't know if you can you address any of that? Or?
Sure. Practices like this and policies like this are pretty common. Districts over the, it's if someone is exhibiting, certain behaviors or for example, may be taking an excessive number of sick days, perhaps going beyond the allotment of sick days or what have you. The districts, it's not atypical to have a right to say, refer, and it would typically be progressive. Something like this would be atypical to say as a first course of action, right? But could be, depending on what might be going on. But usually, and in that kind of situation, the union is absolutely involved. The associations are absolutely involved in those discussions. And, but sometimes you get to a point where, we have to go in this direction for what could be in the best interest of students. If you have, say, an individual who's in a classroom is exhibiting, difficult behaviors in some way, these are some things you might have to do. So I think these are rare, but they do happen. We used to actually require psychological examination of every new employee. That's something we changed about 6-7 years ago.
That's different, yeah.
So this is not really, it's not a mandated policy, but it's not an atypical practice, when it's deemed to be called for. But, it's certainly never a situation where we are, for not what we believe just cause, just asking people to go through some type of physical or psychological evaluation.
Wouldn't there be HIPAA forms one would have to sign? How can we require somebody to take an exam and then according to what my school board says, I have to give you all my doctor's notes after the psych eval?
Yeah, well, once again, I think when you get to this point, you're typically working with your attorney, you're working with association, very possibly association's attorneys. So all of that is done in conjunction with through that communication. So nothing's going to be done that isn't going to be that would violate someone's privacy. But typically when you get to a point like this, it really calls in many cases into question someone's to determine if someone is fit to be in a classroom. And so in that instance, and not just a classroom, just fit to be in their role in general, whatever it may be. So if you get to that point, it's everybody's involved in that process. And when I mean everybody, I'm talking about the associations, attorneys and what have you. And so, I can tell you that, we've done this, we've done this from time to time when we felt it's been necessary. But I could also say that probably over the course of my time here, if it's been done more than 10 times, that's probably an exaggeration. That's a lot. So it's not typical, but it does happen from time to time.
Okay, anybody else on this topic? John, you had your hand up?
I no longer have to say anything. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, any other discussions on any other topic around policy?
I'm sorry, I had one more.
Sure.
The cooperation with law enforcement agencies, did we have, did our liaison, PD liaison, get a copy of this beforehand and all that?
I mean, did we send it to OTPD?
Mhm.
I haven't, it hasn't been sent to them beforehand, no.
Okay. No other further questions or discussion? We can,
Ms. Beal,
Yes.
Ms. Gilman,
Yes.
Ms. Hayes.
Yes for all, except for the two I was chatting about, P3161 and P4161, I'm a no.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Ms. McGovern,
Yes.
Ms. Palamas.
Yes.
Ms. Telerico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
yes.
Moved.
Okay, no public relations. Old business. Old business, Ms. McGovern.
What I was gonna say earlier in personnel, I will say now. I just wanted to thank our Ms. Phyllis for all the work that she's done here over the years. And also on a personal note for me, I didn't mean to get emotional, Lisa.
Somebody not
Sorry, I didn't mean to cry.
Jeez.
But Ms. Narabni, I know you're still on there. And thank you for all you've done personally for Kylie. She had her when she was 3, and then she had her when she went to 5th grade, and you will be missed. Sorry, that's not me.
That's very nice. Whole business, anybody else? Okay, so.
I'm
just
sorry.
On my part,
I had my hand up, sorry.
sure, go ahead.
Don't want to speak out of turn. Here.
You have to speak clearly.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't spoken. I'm sorry, Mr. Webb, but when you talked about the transportation survey, I didn't quite catch. You said we've only received 100 back. And did we not send out like 3,000, or do we not send out to every parent?
We sent it out to everybody, and it was only for people that decided to opt out of transportation, right?
Okay,
So I wouldn't expect to get a large number, but
Good
if I
point.
can get 5% and it equates to 100 kids, and I would be putting them on buses, that's 2 busfuls.
that's awesome. Okay.
So I have an old business topic. One is about our first discussion about the retreat, and we've been discussing this for a while. So most all the board members were in agreement that what we would do is do something together and have a social event. Dinner or I think Alex talked about axe throwing.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't know why I was gonna.
That was-
I don't know where I was.
That was
standing
in
during the axe throwing,
jest.
but,
That was
uh,
in jest.
But that was, you know. I don't know where I was standing.
The
It's actually really
the
fun.
escape room was not in
Yeah.
jest.
suggest.
Yeah. It's a full body sport, right? But Grace Ann, did you wanna make a comment about the retreat at all, or about going out socially? Did you have
I
anything?
mean, I just felt there's a lot of people I know personally that do have COVID right now. And they have 103 fever, on antivirals, sick in bed, can't move. And honestly, I think if we waited this long, we're all gonna be down in Atlantic City in a month or 2 months from now. For me personally, I just will opt out of this, just for this. If you're gonna have it, you know, I'm be more than happy to go next time. That's really how I feel.
Okay.
Fair point.
So first of all, we don't have to make a decision here. We can all just think about it and I can send something around, right?
It's not ours.
Well, right now, everybody on the board, everybody on the board was okay with doing it. Grace Ann expressed a trepidation about doing it. I'd like to, you know, if we all felt we wanted to go out and not, then we should, you know, we could do that. Grace Ann was in her emails to me was gracious to say, hey, you guys want to go and have some fun? That's cool,
Let's go.
you know, and send me some pictures and stuff like that. And but if not, we could always wait, or we could do both. We could do it now and we could do it in October, right? So, you know, whatever, so you guys think about it and I'll talk to each of you and you guys decide what you want to do, right? Okay, but right now, the 9th would be the date because no one else has any other time free, it looks like. The other thing is, there's been a lot of questions around policy and things like that, about how to make policy, how to talk about policy, just regular board demeanor and those kind of things. So if you have questions that you like Mary Ann Friedman to have beforehand, right? She'll make herself available on the 16th to answer questions and talk about stuff. I didn't think the things that were asked for rose to the level of having to pay Michael Gross, but if it turns out that there were, then we would do something like that as well. But right now, if you have some questions before the 16th, we can do that. The other thing was that there were two things. One is I would like to accomplish, and I'm just trying to figure out the timing of this, is when we would do board goals and we look at some more board goals. We seem to wait a little bit long to put those things into place, and we seem to rush it kind of at the end. So I wouldn't mind if we had a board goals discussion and look at the board goals that we currently have, especially since I don't want to say we're out of the COVID era, but it's certainly a different era than we were when we kind of created these board goals and where we are today. We do have things like our building and those kind of things that are being in the process that we should maybe clarify where we want to be. So I kind of thought that we would do that on maybe the 30th. We would do it then. The 16th is a full agenda of Mary Ann being here, our strategic plan, and it's a work session. So I think we have enough to cover on the 16th. And we can move that to the 30th. If that's okay with everybody. Sound good? Okay, great. So those were my topics on old business. Anybody else have anything for old business? Okay. Anybody for new business? John?
One of the things that I had sent to you, Mr. President, and to our Vice President and Mr. Spanglers, I would like some sort of discussion with the board, and I'm kind of like bringing this up in an open setting to allow everybody to have their input on it, about security in the coming year. I think it's extremely important. You know, we're already halfway through the summer, right? It's gonna be August before we know it. And I know that there are plenty of parents here who are gonna wanna know that everything is in safe hands with our students going into the schools this year. I also know that our administration has been hard at work over the summer, ensuring that these policies and things are being created. I don't know if that takes the form of a a presentation from the administration or anything like that, and if that should be done in executive session. But I also, trying to think of how to phrase this without saying things I don't want to say. I would like to make sure that we have an armed officer in every single school at all times during school hours, as well as a policy in place to ensure that should an officer be out, we have multiple backup plans to ensure that there are more armed officers ready to be present in the schools. Additionally, I know that we have some retired police officers currently who are working in the schools who are not allowed to carry their sidearms with them. I would like us to at least consider or address maybe looking at that policy so that we can allow them to do so. And I would also like to hear sort of what we are looking at in terms of ensuring that teachers going into the new school year are aware of the dangers of propping open doors and things like that. So I just kind of wanted to put that out here for everybody to either put their 2 cents in or maybe yield to some of our members with more experience who have a better idea of how to go about this, or to hear from Jim on his opinion on how we'd like to address these things.
Yeah. Well, first, do we want to have some discussion on John's topic that he brought up, just kind of following? Yes, anybody have any thoughts that they want to share at this time? Sure.
In thinking about security, when I was going through the standard operating procedures, we do have outlined specific steps that we take in all of our buildings for security, but it also made a point of saying that not everything could be shared in that handbook, and that certainly Dr. Stefankowitz and the whole security team that is doing things you probably know behind the scenes as well. So to share everything that's going on with the public would be difficult, but I know and agree that we want to assure everybody that things are secure. And again, that manual was pretty specific. If you go through, I made note of a few pages, page 98, page 99, made specific references to what is required in each building as far as security, where the security officers have to stand, what they do after the buses arrive, you know, what their responsibilities are all the way through the entire day, escorting students, doing this or that. So I would reference that handbook just for starters, and then continue the discussion to expand that more.
Yep. Maybe I should go, maybe Jim, maybe I could get your opinion on this. Like, how would you, what do you think of? Thank you, Irene.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of facets of security, you know, everything from simple things like, you know, ID cards, right, to armed guards, right? So, I mean, there's a broad spectrum when you talk about school security. So I think, you know, if we want to have, you know, I think any discussions about specific practices and things that we do would probably be more of a executive session discussion, because obviously those are things that you don't want to have necessarily in the public domain. You know, what I will say, so if we can pinpoint specific things we want to talk about, then, you know, we can certainly have those discussions. I will share, just for everybody's information, that myself and another member of the administration attended the summer safety symposium, very alliterative, that was put on by the Department of Education, Department of Homeland Security. So we've attended that and brought a lot back to us with that. Next week, our entire building administrative teams are meeting with Township OEM for a tabletop drill to talk about security procedures, and focus this year is, last year's focus was the high school, this year's focus will be on the middle school, but everybody's involved, but there's just, you know, specific focus. Constant contact with Chief Sorrentino and talking about the Class 3 initiative in terms of ensuring that we have Class 3s in all of our buildings come September. So there's a lot going on in that regard. But so I think if we have, if the board wants to have this discussion, just let us know specifically what we want to talk about, and then we can determine the appropriate measure or appropriate time within a meeting to do that.
Is it because I don't remember us doing this well, is it just appropriate for us at this point before sometime before school starts, if we could put this on the agenda to get kind of a run through of what we are doing with security in an executive session, or is that not a, it seemed.
Well, once again, I would want to understand what there's a lot involved in security, so I would want to just have an understanding. I mean, to do everything is a lot. I mean, it's a big discussion. So are there particular things that people want to talk about, then we can kind of focus in on those things. That would be helpful.
Yeah, John.
I mean, I could narrow down, I kind of wanted to open it up to see if anybody else had any other opinions, but I could very much narrow down. I would really, and I would be welcome to hearing from Chief Sorrentino as well on his opinion of this. I would like to have a memorandum of agreement with and I will, in the future, after giving us multiple opportunities for discussion, put this forward as a resolution. I would like to have a memorandum of agreement with the Ocean Township Police Department that if we are absent an armed officer in a school, that they will back that up, and that we will have some sort of policy in place to ensure that that is there. And I don't think that anyone is going to have an issue funding wise to do so. I'm aware that we have retired officers in our schools right now who we are not allowing to carry their sidearms. I am open to discussing them having the opportunity to back those people up. And so these are the things that I would like to specifically discuss, is how we could do those things.
Right. So you want to talk more, just to interpret here, you want to talk from security about the law enforcement at the schools.
Yes, and that is because, just so that it's clear for the public and for this board, I have had conversations with Dr. Stefankowicz, being a liaison for the security committee. I feel very comfortable that he's doing everything in his power to ensure that these schools are extremely secure going into the new year. That is the only thing that I would like to make sure that it's a known thing between us and the Ocean Township Police Department, that this will be provided, and that there's never a question, that we all go to bed every night and know that when we wake up in the morning, that there's going to be an armed officer in the school with our kids. That's to really narrow it down. However, I'm open to other discussions or opinions, whatever it is, the board thinks.
Yeah. Does anybody have any things to John's comments? So let's just stay on John's comments right now.
When Dr. Stefankowicz was saying, I'd like to know some things you guys would like to know. I would love, since I'm not on the safety committee, and only two of us are, right?
I think safety liaisons, right?
Yeah, I'm a liaison.
No, but- okay.
It's French.
I would like, and I'm not saying like a tally list or something, but I'm sure we have a crisis communication document. I think that's something the Board of Ed should have, an actual crisis plan, like that's been printed out. I'd love to know things like, does every teacher that has a window on their door have do they have a covering? Do we have any bulletproof windows in this district? I have no answers to that. So like some kind of inventory or of sorts would have been something that I would love to
So
see.
just sticking to John's point, what did you think about John? Like, so you were asking for an inventory. John was asking for the idea of
armed officers in
Armed
schools,
officers,
and a
right.
memorandum of agreement with the police department,
right.
saying that if we are absent
I'm
an
okay with
officer,
that.
that we have a.
Okay. Does anybody have any other points that they want to about this discussion?
Speak your mind, Irene.
Yeah, I
Please,
know.
yeah,
I'd
speak your
like to
mind.
make a motion to table this. I'm not quite sure.
I'm not, I haven't brought a motion
Motion, no.
before. Yeah, I've not brought a motion
You
before.
have a
No, there's a motion.
Yeah, there's no motion.
I think
motion
John,
to continue the discussion. May I make a motion to continue this discussion when we have more information from Dr. Stefankowicz attending and meeting with his team?
yeah, I think
That's what I'm
if you be, yeah, I think what John was more asking for, the motion was more like, can we get this on the agenda?
Yes,
Right.
correct.
So if it would be okay with you, if I could if I could talk to Jim and kind of let him vet through what we're kind of talking about. Just thinking it through, and then we can figure out how to put that, what the context we can put on the agenda. Is that okay? I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, you didn't have
I just
any?
had one more comment
Oh.
about what John was saying, because I also would like to see security or officers present at after-school activities.
Okay. You want to?
Well, if I can just say, we have them at a lot of major activities, but I mean, are you talking about police officers?
It could be security.
No, they're at the overwhelming majority of them, but
I mean, I was just thinking of, the gentleman that came and talked about the one situation where he went to a school activity and there was no security there, and then he called the police, so
Right,
that was.
which was,
my comment.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I looked into that and that was, I think, with all due respect to that individual, grossly misrepresented. So.
Ms. Montgomery?
I was just gonna ask, and I might be making this up, but in my mind, I feel like I remember a million years ago, when Chief Peters was here, I feel like he came and talked to the board, just generalizing. I know you've told us, and I know we've seen the memorandum of agreement, but just, that's how I found out that there's officers just sweep the school sometimes and things like that. I feel like Chief Peters came.
Well, he came
On
when we
that.
were talking about the
Ye-
class 3.
Yes, that's what I
Oh,
was
so
gonna
that's
say.
what it was.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I don't, okay, because I was thinking maybe if Chief Sorrentino came and just kind of gave an overview to the board from his point of view.
Well, Chief comes to our security meetings.
So
and,
true.
you know,
We didn't have a
he's-
security committee, a big security committee, I think, at that point. when
Yeah,
Chief Peters
but he
came.
doesn't meet
Right.
with
so
us.
he comes and, reports to us.
So,
I'm sure, there's.
so on this topic, is it okay that I give Jim at least 15, 20 minutes to think about it and we can figure out how to put this on an agenda, what the context might look like?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, is there another area that we should consider, or by the way, if you have a thought about it, you can always call me up and tell me. Yep, Ms. Hayes.
When I sent, I think 3 weeks ago, a letter to several of you board members, about how the state does these free assessments. And I'm wondering if there's been any movement on that. The State Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning can literally attend our, those drills that we have with active shooter. They can tell us, did we do anything wrong at this school? Are they saying the wrong things over that loudspeaker? Did they go down a straight line to the backyard? So two things, they have, they do that, they can give us an audit in real time. And then there's 12 different professional development topics that they do for free. And to my knowledge, we have never once utilized this office. So is that something that we can consider, activating or asking?
Would you like me to answer
Yeah,
that?
did you answer? Yeah.
Yeah, I've mentioned this office and those services a number of times. Jeff Gale is the director. I've mentioned his name and working to reach out to him. I think after Evaldi, and I did reach out to him several times, they did not respond to us. I did speak with Tom Gambino, who's also part of that office when I was at the symposium a couple of weeks ago, and because they ran it. And at that symposium, and so they'll come out with us, but the state is actually, there's a new initiative based on a new law that requires school districts every year to conduct a security audit. That's got to be done every year. That law was signed in 2018. They've just, I think with COVID and everything else, they've just gotten around to how they want us to do that. So they work with a federal agency out of, I believe it's FEMA. And so there's a self-audit that that initially had 2,000 questions on it. They've whittled it down to 400 questions. Yeah, really good. And then what they'd like districts to do is do that audit, and then they would come out and then sort of evaluate that audit and work with you. So we were just discussing that administratively today, and I think that's something that we would like to do this fall in all of our schools. But we did reach out. I did reach out to Jeff Gale in that department about coming in this summer, and I think they've just been so inundated because of the post of Valdi and the what was it, Oxford up in the one in Michigan earlier in the year. So there's just been very busy, but and we have taken advantage of some of those and professional development in the past, including the summer symposium, which they just did. But I don't want to underscore the work we do with our town Office of Emergency Management and Tom Rue. And, we've done some outstanding professional development with all of our folks, and they have actually come in and worked with us during our drills. And remember that OTPD is typically at most of our, if not all of our active shooter drills and bomb threat drills and all of the shelter in place drills. They come and observe those in most instances. So, we do take advantage of working with, local law enforcement and agencies in that regard. But that's what's coming up in terms of audit in the next couple of months.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes,
One last item. Did county representatives come out to visit the summer programs? And if yes, did they have feedback?
Not yet. They did come last summer, and we did have to provide all of our times and schools and everything to the county, and up to this point, they have not visited us.
Are they required?
When I was reading them, she asked if they were required to. When I was reading the minutes, I saw that you had mentioned it, so I didn't know if between the last meeting and this meeting.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's not really, I don't think it's a requirement. I think the state wants the county office to get out to as many programs as possible. Maybe since they did come last year, they're not as, they're looking to see some other, districts that they haven't been to. I talk to Les Richards all the time, so I can ask him if he's intending to come out and see the programs. Very happy to have him come if you'd like.
okay, any other new business?
New business.
Yeah.
I just wanted to congratulate our new director of special services, Kristen Hansen, who is featured in this month's New Jersey School Board School Leader. She was given an award.
That's
for
great.
her,
I didn't know that.
programs.
That's wonderful.
It is, it's really wonderful and.
But let's not demote her. She's our assistant superintendent. She's not our director. She's on here. She probably just had like a little, conniption because
Sorry, Kristen.
okay, you're still the assistant soup, Kristen. You're okay.
I'm sorry, in the magazine, she is noted as Director of Special Services, but that was previously.
Yes.
But it was a wonderful article highlighting her innovative programs with special ed students. So I think it was very nice for school
great.
boards to recognize her.
That's outstanding.
Yes,
Congratulations.
it
We did not know that.
Nice.
Yes, we did.
Any other new business? Okay, we'll move to public comment. Anybody like to make a comment on any topic at this time? Anybody in the audience? You sure, Steve? Okay, anybody, Miss Mary Ann, anybody on the line like to make a statement?
No, President Weinstein, there are no commenters.
Okay, great. With that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, everybody have a nice night. Thank you. Thanks, Mary Ann.
Bye, Marianne.
Okay.